first breath, a first step, a first word. Becoming strong, becoming whole, becoming one, becoming human. Human in the ambitious pursuits of the things in my heart, hoping that my eyes won't see them depart. Human in the emotional parts hidden, because sometimes it feels that laughing too loud is forbidden. Human in the identities deeply rooted within, wondering if the story of who I am is only to begin. But assured of the idea that my story is finite, knowing that even the sun's light won't always burn bright. Yet some things in the ordinary day feel eternal. The soft-spoken touch of a mum, the words scribbled in my journal, the smile of a stranger, the rainbow stretched over the sky that I see. Am I just hopeful? Or am I fearful of the small things that define me? Thirsting to know, thirsting to be rational in the unexplainable. Am I seeking something sustainable or even attainable? A last breath, a last step, a last word. Human, 2023, who are we?
Hello and welcome to day 2 of Human 2023. This is very exciting. You're at the lunchtime event where you've had hot dogs and you're about to hear very interesting things from Mike, the speaker today. If you don't know me, I'm Sam. I'm a student here in Cambridge and I'm one of the people who's part of the CU helping to get this week going. And it is so good to see you. You're all immensely welcome. Just to say, if you need to leave at any point, if you've got supervisions, lectures, that thing called work, which we all sometimes do, please feel free to go at any point. If you also need a toilet, there are toilets in this building. You can go through that door. You can go through the door round there at the back. You'll find some on the ground level. They're accessible toilets. If you go upstairs, there'll be some more up there as well. As I said, this is Human, and we are thinking about what it means to be human and all the different ways that we can think about that. Today's talk is on being enough. How do we enjoy failure as much as success? And as I said, we've got Mike, so I'm going to invite him to come up and join us now. Hello, Mike. Hello. Thank you for coming. Tell us a bit about yourself. Who are you?
Thank you. Yeah, my name's Mike. I'm married to Rach. I live here, about 10 minutes bike ride that way.
Amazing. So you live here. Do you have any other connection to Cambridge?
Yeah. So I was at Selwyn. Anyone here from Selwyn? No. Oh, the agony. I did English Lit. Thank you. Excellent. Okay. I'm feeling slightly lonely now, but yeah, I was at Selwyn doing English not very long ago.
Thank you. Well, thank you for coming back. It's
joy.
wonderful to have you. I'm going to hand over to you. Take it away.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. So, I wonder how many of you guys have come across the podcast How to Fail with Elizabeth Day. The format is basically that she gets someone on and she asks them to share 3 big ways in which they've failed in their life and what they've learned from those experiences, which makes you kind of inevitably wonder what your failures would be if you somehow got onto the podcast. I know that my first one, absolutely, would be my day-by-day, heartbreaking and abject failure to grow a beard. It haunts me. It haunts me. But I'll come back to another failure that I would definitely have to include later on. But she said that the reason she started it was this. She said, if I examined my life, I knew that the lessons bequeathed by episodes of failure were ineffably more profound than anything I had gleaned from its slippery shadow twin, success. In other words, if we can learn how to fail, then failure can be deeply good for us. Of course, success in small doses can be good for us, particularly if we're in material need. But the issue is more our need for success and our fear of failure, the constant pressure that we feel to be good enough. Caleb Meekins puts it in his TED Talk, the fear of failure cripples. The thing is that a need for success actually makes us brittle and it makes us bitter. If we need to succeed, then we're brittle. The possibility that things might not go our way makes us tense and anxious. And when we actually do fail, it really can crush us horribly. But it also makes us bitter. If we feel that we need to be the best, that we need to succeed, it's very hard to be generous towards others. It makes it harder not to get envious when we see someone else's success. We find ourselves getting angry, tempted to be self-righteous and judgmental of others. And the thing is, I think those dynamics are the same, whatever kind of success it is that we are addicted to. Whether it's the classic sort of achievement-style success, academic, career-type success, or whether it's social success, popularity, or success in romantic relationships, or whether it's ethical or moral success, the sense that we need to show that we are good enough, that we are a good and ethical person, and for people to see that. Or it might even be religious success. I imagine there might be all kinds of different religious convictions in the room today, but I'm sure that there would be some of us where we really feel we need to be good enough followers of our religion, and we need to be acknowledged as such. And the thing is, whether it's religious or ethical or social or classic kind of academic success that we're in pursuit of, it can have these exact same effects. It can make us bitter and brittle. And in contrast, the freedom to fail is a key ingredient to flourishing as human beings. If we're free to fail without it destroying us, if we can admit our failures and understand them, then we're able to learn from that experience and grow. If we're able to fail without it destroying us, then we get less twitchy. We get less anxious about how things are going to play out. We can enjoy the life that we're living more fully. And we can be less judgmental and more generous towards others. And the thing is, I think we all know this. I think we all want to feel free to fail. But the question is, how? So I'd love you to discuss, just with the people around you for a minute or so, why do you think we want to succeed? What is it that we're hungry for when we're hungry for success? Just have a little chat with the 2 or 3 people around you for a minute or two. Okay, fantastic. I wish that we could spend the next couple of hours hearing what people said to that and engaging with that and talking together, but we don't have that kind of time. So the question is, for all of us, how can we be free from the fear of failure, the need to perform and to be good enough? Let me just tell you 2 stories about that. The first one is a film called Rush that I watched while I was at Selwyn and that really kind of got to me somehow. It's about 2 F1 drivers in the 70s, Niki Lauda and James Hunt. Hunt is the one with the floppy hair. And they are both absolutely desperate to win. But the thing is that at this point, F1 is ridiculously dangerous. Around that time, about 1 in the 20 drivers were dying each season because it was so dangerous. And in the middle of the film and in the middle of the season, Niki Lauda gets married. And you see him on his honeymoon, running around, messing around with his new wife. And it's beautiful because you've never seen this guy happy before. But then he goes back to racing, and they race an incredibly wet, rainy day in Germany. And Lauda collides with another car and has a terrible crash, which almost kills him. And as he is recovering in hospital gradually, Hunt is winning race after race and eating up his lead in the championship. But Lauda is determined to get back in the car and to win the championship. And in the end, against all medical advice, he manages to get back to racing before the end of the season. And it comes down to the last race in Japan. And Lauda is ahead, but if Hunt wins that race, he will win the championship. But Sunday comes and it's raining again. It's raining hard. And they start the race, and Lauda gets out in front in the first lap, and the whole first lap, Hunt is trying to put pressure on him, trying to overtake, but Lauda's fast enough to hold him off, and actually Hunt can barely see in the thick spray that's coming off the back tires of Lauda's car. And then they get round after the first lap, and Lauda suddenly, unexpectedly, pulls off into the pits. And he stops his car, and the engineers are running over to him, shouting, "What's wrong? What's wrong? What do we need to fix?" And he just undoes his seatbelt and steps out of the car. And he walks over to his wife and he says to her, "It was too dangerous." And they sit together and they watch Hunt win the championship on the TV. And I remember watching that as a Cambridge student, addicted to the need to succeed. And it just leaving me in bits. I was just sitting there going, yes, you can get out of the car. You can get out of the car. You don't have to win. You don't have to be the best. You don't have to let that drive you to destruction, because this is enough. To know that you are known and you are loved, this is enough. You don't have to destroy yourself trying to win. This is enough. I think that we feel like we need success because success will show us that we are worth something, that we matter. But actually, the only thing strong enough to really satisfy that hunger, to satiate that kind of craving that we have for success, is to be known exactly as we are and to be loved exactly as we are. We need to be known and loved. And the wonderful thing is that I'm convinced that we are. That every single one of us is. Let me tell you the second story. This is a story that was a kind of made-up story told by Jesus, and he told it when he was surrounded by an interesting crowd. At the front of the crowd, there's kind of this group of people who are rebels, they're rejects, they're outcasts from society. They've done all sorts of things that culture thought were unforgivable, and yet they love being with Jesus. They love the way he talks to them and eats with them and speaks to them about God. And at the back of the crowd, there are the kind of morality police of the day. Very, very upright, ethical people who are outraged by the way that he seems to condone and encourage the behavior of these people who are just beyond the pale. And Jesus looks at this crowd and he tells them a story. And he says that there was a father with 2 sons. And one day the younger son goes to his father and says, "Can I have my share of the inheritance now?" And of course, that basically means, can we pretend that you're dead so that I can have your money and get as far away from you as possible? And yet, in spite of how hurtful and insulting that must have been to the father, weirdly, he says yes. And he sells a share of his property and he gives his son the money and he lets him go. And the son gets as far away as he can and tries to kind of start a new life on his own. And he spends all of his newfound wealth in the pursuit of pleasure. And then after a while, he finds that this is a lot harder than he thought. His money starts to run out, and then his new friends start to run out, and eventually there's a famine in that country, and the food starts running out, and he ends up a desperate, humiliated failure, feeding pigs to survive, and desperate to eat the slops that he's having to feed them. And at this point, he has a realization. He realizes that he is a failure. He realizes that on his own, he is not enough. He realizes that at the deepest kind of moral and relational level, he's failed by deeply hurting and insulting his father, the one who'd given him everything that he has. And he decides to make the long walk home. And he gets up and walks all the way, dirty and ragged, stinking of pig and sweat. And then the next thing Jesus says, I just find so beautiful. He says, while he was still a long way off, the father saw him and had compassion on him. This father who he had insulted and hurt so profoundly has been watching and waiting, hoping that he would see his son on the horizon coming home. And when he sees him, he just runs. He hitches up his robes and he runs out to him. And he doesn't even let him finish his apology. He just wraps him up in his arms and he kisses him. And he calls to the servants, quick, bring my own best white robe and put it on him to cover up all of his shame and guilt and disgrace. He gets his family ring and he puts it back on the son's finger to say, he is my son and he belongs. He gets some shoes for his feet because they must be killing him, and he says, quick, let's have a feast and invite the whole village to celebrate because this is my kid. He was dead out there, but he's alive again. He was lost, but now he's found. And Jesus is saying with that story, that is what God is like. He's telling us that God cannot wait to run out and forgive us and welcome us home. He's just longing to see us beginning to turn around, beginning to have that same realization, beginning to admit that in many ways we have failed. You know, that by ourselves we're not enough. That it's not just that we've failed to live up to some impossible standard that our culture has set us, but that actually, if we're honest, even just our own standards, our own sense of what kind of people we want to be, what kind of people we should be, we fail to live up to those too. I know I do all the time. He invites us to admit that, and to admit that on a deeper level, our rejection and our decision to ignore the God who loves us, who made us, who's given us everything good that we have, that also is a deep moral and relational failure. But Jesus says if we'll just admit that, then we can know that God will run out to us, that God knows us to the very darkest depths, the kind of things that we would never want any of our friends even to see. He knows all of it. There's nothing we can hide from him, and yet he loves us completely, wildly, absolutely. Jesus doesn't just tell us that God is like that. It's even better than that. Jesus actually shows us that God's like that. Because Jesus said that he was God himself becoming a human being in order to run out and meet us, in order ultimately to stretch his arms wide as he died on the cross to embrace us and forgive us and welcome us home, to take onto himself the burden of all of our guilt, all of our failure, all of the ways that we've wronged others and God, to bear all of that himself so that he could wrap us up in the white robe of his moral beauty and perfection, and he could welcome us home. This is what real Christianity is all about, is Jesus telling us and then showing us that that is what God is like. And the thing is, if we know that God loves us like that he knows us utterly, we can't hide anything from him, we cannot pretend, but that he's watching and waiting and longing to see us on the horizon, just beginning to turn round so that he can run out and meet us. If we realize that his love is not conditional on us being good enough, it's not conditional on our success, it's not affected by our failure, that is profoundly liberating. And I can testify to that in my own experience. I just want to share two ways. One is that it really makes a difference to our fear of failure and to our experience of that kind of pressure to achieve, to be good enough, to keep going. I had a kind of mid-uni crisis in the second term of my second year where for some reason just everything started piling up. I found myself with huge doubts about my course, huge doubts about my church and my faith, and I was exhausted and overwhelmed, and I just felt like I don't want to do any of this. And I remember one particular morning very vividly where the alarm went off, and the first thought that went through my head was, please don't make me do this day. Please don't make me do this. And then I remember the second thought that came into my head, and I don't know why, but the second thought that came into my head was, do you know what? If you didn't get out of bed today, if you just lay here curled up in a ball and did nothing at all, and you let down every single person who's expecting something from you today, do you know how God would feel about you at the end of the day? He would love you just as fiercely and faithfully and passionately as he does right now. And I remember that realization just kind of washing over me and realizing I didn't need to do anything. But the joy of that and the freedom of that and the kind of lifting of that burden of expectation made me think, actually, yeah, I can get up and do this day. Not because I have to, but because I want to. And that is the dynamic of everyday life if we know Jesus' love that runs out and embraces us like this. We don't have to, but we want to. But it also makes a real difference to our experience of actual serious failures as well. Here's the other one that I would definitely have to talk about if I somehow ended up on How to Fail with Elizabeth Day. I had a best friend at college. We met right at the start, and we just got on so naturally. It was such a beautiful friendship in amongst a group of friends around us, but we were kind of best mates. But looking back with hindsight, I realized that then over the 3 years that followed, I started to sort of exploit that friendship, basically. She was a really gifted, behind-the-scenes kind of organizer. She made things happen. She was brilliant at that. And I, as you can probably tell, liked being in front of people, liked doing stuff that was impressive, and I was kind of instinctively a bit of a show-off. And we worked together on a bunch of projects. She started off helping me out with something that I was doing, and then another thing, and time again, people would give me all of the credit, and she would have worked incredibly hard, and I would just lap it up. And one time we were doing something actually together for the Christian Union, and she called me in the Christmas holidays and she said, "Mike, I'm not sure I can do all of this stuff that I'm supposed to be doing because I've got an exam when I get back, and I'm not ready." And I basically said, "Look, we've all got work. You're just going to have to suck it up." And she didn't do very well on the exam. And then when it got to the final term of final year, I was worried that I wasn't going to do well enough on my finals, and I pretty much just ditched all of the projects that we were involved in together. And to be honest, I ditched a lot of my friendships and just didn't really spend much time with any of them for a term, and spent all the time I could in the library doing as much work as I could. And when the results came back, I got a first, and she missed it by a couple of marks. And it would be a very good case to say it was because of the exam in January. And she was really, really hurt. She was so hurt by it that she actually really struggled to talk to me. And the first thing is that she knew Jesus. And so Jesus was working in her heart, and so she didn't want to just leave it there. She didn't just want to abandon me. She wanted me to realize what I'd done and to be able to repent of that and to change. And so she arranged for me to be able to kind of talk about it with a mutual friend who understood things from her point of view. And then secondly, when that happened, because I knew Jesus and Jesus was at work in me, he was there disarming the defense mechanisms in my heart. Because instinctively, as maybe you guys can recognize this, I wanted to explain how all of this was just a misunderstanding. How actually it was kind of unjustified if you really understood what had gone on, or how maybe for all sorts of reasons it was just a mistake, that actually it didn't really, I'd messed up, but it didn't really reflect anything about my character, about who I really was. But the thing is, Jesus wouldn't let me get away with that. And because I knew that I couldn't hide anything from him, but I also knew that I couldn't do anything that would be too bad for him to run out and forgive me and embrace me, he helped me to admit how badly I'd failed. He helped me to realize how seriously this exposed actually my pride and my selfishness, and the way that in actually not just this situation, but lots of others, I was narcissistic and thoughtless about others. And I was fully capable of using any excuse, even using religion, as a way to put myself first and to not show care and compassion to the people around me, even my closest friends. And realizing that was pretty harrowing. But I genuinely think that process of realizing why I'd hurt her so badly, and of bringing that to God and repenting of it and seeking his forgiveness, and then apologizing to her and talking it through and seeking her forgiveness, I can't think of many other experiences in my life that have shaped me so profoundly, that have made me who I am today to such a deep extent. And Jesus is saying in that story, if you realize who he is and what he's done, if you realize that he knows you inside out and there's no point running, there's no point hiding, but that he loves you and he longs to forgive you, then admitting your failures isn't something that you have to be afraid of. It's not something that will crush you. It can actually be the best thing that's ever happened to you. But interestingly, that's not the end of Jesus' story. He starts talking about the older brother. And the older brother is out in the field working hard. And when he hears the laughter and the music and the dancing start inside, he calls a servant and says, "What's going on?" And the servant says, "Well, your brother's come home, and your father's killed the fattened calf and thrown a feast because he has him back safe and sound." And the older brother is furious, and he refuses to go in. And eventually the father has to come out to him, and he pleads with him to come in and celebrate. But the older brother says, "Look, I've been slaving for you all my life, and you never even gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. And now this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, and you kill the fattened calf for him." And you can almost hear the tears in his dad's eyes as he says to him, "My son, I'm always with you. Everything I have is yours. But we have to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost, and now he's found." See, Jesus is depicting this older brother as someone who cannot admit to his own failures. He has to succeed. He has to be the best. And it makes him angry and bitter. He's too proud even to ask his father for a party that he wants because he wants to have earned it. He wants to have deserved it. And it makes him judgmental and envious towards others. And Jesus stops the story on that cliffhanger with the father standing, arms open wide, and this older brother standing in front of him. And you can almost imagine him looking up at the people in the back of the crowd who are like me, who are morally addicted to success. And he almost looks at them and says, "Right then, what are you going to do? Are you going to lay down your shovel, lay down your pride, and come into the feast? Or are you going to let your pride lead you to just ignore me and let it leave you out in the cold forever?" So if you'll excuse me just for a moment being a bit intense, I just want to give a kind of warning from that to any of you who can resonate with the brother and resonate with, the same way that for me, I'm still addicted in many ways to wanting to succeed, to wanting to be the best. I just want to say, if that's us, it might be that continuing to succeed is the worst thing that could ever happen to us. Because whether it's in kind of social success or romantic success or academic or a kind of ethical, moral sense of success, whichever it is, if we keep successfully feeding our addiction to it, then we will get more and more dependent on it. It will control us more and more. It will make us more and more superior and judgmental towards others, and we'll become increasingly willing to destroy ourselves in pursuit of more. If we don't learn how to fail and find a way to know that we really are enough, that isn't shakeable like that it can't be lost by our failure, then our addiction to success will end up stopping us from growing and maturing and changing and learning. It will make us fragile and anxious, and in the end, it will drive us to our destruction. Whether at some point we kind of literally crash and burn in some dramatic way, or whether it's just that it leads us to run and run and run through all the days of our lives without ever slowing down to think about the deeper questions that we desperately, desperately need to engage with before we meet Jesus face to face. But Jesus is saying if we will just admit that we have failed, if we will just embrace our failures, and like that younger son, we'll just turn around and come home and realize that he is longing, itching to run out to us and embrace us, then we can be free from that. We can be free to be generous and joyful. We can be free to recognize our failures and to learn and grow and mature through them. Now, you might be hearing all of that and thinking, well, that's lovely, but isn't it just wishful thinking? And I want to say no. Christianity doesn't ask for a kind of blind faith that believes it just because it seems nice. In Christianity, faith means trust that is based on evidence. And for me, I was convinced that this was true because I was convinced by the evidence that Jesus literally came back from the dead, not because I thought it would have some psychologically beneficial effects on me. But actually, I wonder if the charge of wishful thinking and kind of blind faith cuts both ways on this one. I want to invite you to question the faith that this culture and this university has encouraged you to have, that you can keep succeeding in whichever realm, relational or academic or moral. You can keep succeeding until one day you've succeeded enough that it feels satisfying and you feel content. I wonder if that might actually be a kind of blind faith that actually flies in the face of the evidence. So let me invite you to question that this week. And alongside it, to question and investigate the claim that Jesus is making to be the liberating reality that replaces that destructive fiction. The claim that Jesus is making to be the one who knows us completely and yet who loves us utterly in a way that sets us free to fail. So, what's your reaction to this? I'd love you to chat with the person next to you or the people around you and see if any of those thought bubbles kind of are the closest to describing your instinctive reaction to what you've just heard. And then I'd love you to discuss, why is that? You know, if you're thinking, I don't need to think about this, why? If you're thinking, I believe this in theory, but I don't think it's having as much effect on me as it should, why is that? And as you're doing that, I'd love you to submit any questions that you have about what I've said, or actually just your reflections on that in the form of a question. You know, even if it's just a statement, I would love this to be true, but I can't believe it because this thing. And then do upvote anything that you'd like to hear a response to, and we'll be back up to answer as many of those as we can in a couple of minutes' time.
You got it. Okay, we are going to get going with our Q&A. Please do keep asking questions. We need your thoughts. We'd love to talk about this, so keep them coming as we go. Amazing. So, one of the first questions we have, Mike, all this sounds great, but how is what you're offering any different to just being sensible and valuing different things? Why does it have to be relevant to Jesus?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question, and I to be honest, I was aware as I was finishing this talk that it left this question pretty open. What I would suggest is this. I think there is, well, I think if you look at people who have succeeded in kind of achievement-style ways, what you see time and time and time again is a story of somebody who has got to the top and then realized that it didn't do what it was going to promise, what it promised to do. I mean, there's a quote from Johnny Wilkinson about how he worked his whole life to win the World Cup. He kicks the drop goal that wins England the Rugby World Cup, and the next morning he wakes up and thinks, what now? And the next few years, he's in the dressing room feeling like a fraud, feeling like he's going to get found out, that it never gives him the security and the kind of satisfaction that he was longing for. And you hear stories of that all over the place. And so what I think you learn from that is that relational love and being known and loved in a relationship is by far the most genuinely kind of grounding, satisfying, liberating thing that we can succeed at. But the question is, if our whole sense of that is based on another human being, or even a group of other human beings, then one, it's still something that we can succeed or fail at, and two, it's something that they can succeed or fail at. And it puts an unbearable pressure on the other person if they are the one that is bearing the weight of our sense of self and our sense of security and being enough. And actually, I think you see that time and time again in relationships. And it's profoundly liberating to have, to know that there really is a God, that actually all of this stuff isn't just us finding a clever way to a kind of work around in an impersonal and bleak universe, that, hang on, if we work together here and we love each other, we might be able to trick our brains into believing that love is a real thing and that we have value and that everything isn't bleak and existentially meaningless. Actually, that's not how it is. The universe is full of meaning. It's made by a personal God of love. That's why we need this stuff. And if we know the love from God, then it liberates us to enjoy and receive love from other people in a way that doesn't put all of our weight on them never failing us. And that's liberating for them, and it's liberating for us. There's loads more that I could say, but I don't want to just give a whole nother talk.
Brilliant. Thank you. We've got quite a big question that's come up. Is there genuinely no failure too big that God wouldn't want me back for?
Yeah. No, there isn't. So the heart of Christianity is the idea that, as I was saying in the talk, that what Jesus came to do on the cross is to take onto himself, if we will give it to him, is to take onto himself all of the consequences, all of the guilt, all of the kind of price that justice rightly demands for everything we've ever done. There's an amazing speech that a woman made at the trial of an abuser, and she said, "The question you're answering with this sentence, Judge, is how much is a little girl worth?" Justice is about recognizing what people are worth and reasserting that. And the point of the cross is that Jesus takes onto himself the price that everything we've ever done wrong demands, if we will be united to him, if we'll give it to him, so that justice is dealt with. It's satisfied because he dealt with it for us. And that means that there is literally nothing that can kind of go beyond the bounds of what God himself coming in human form and dying a God-forsaken death in agony, what that pays for. There's nothing that can't be paid for by that. And so Christianity takes justice extremely seriously. It does not let us off the hook on justice, but it also means that there is literally nothing that if we turn around and we come home, God cannot run out and forgive us for and take it away and give us a new life.
Great. You talked about your own failure in life. I've got a question talking about the severity of consequences of failure. So how is it possible to enjoy failure when the consequences are far more severe than just getting a bad grade?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And in some ways, that exposes the Cambridginess of my choice of the title for the talk. I think, when the stakes are really high and kind of existential and kind of life and death in the way that they are for many people much of the time, I wouldn't call the talk how to enjoy failure as much as success. I would call it something like how to find a rock and a solidity and a certain hope and a future that cannot be taken away even by the worst kinds of failure. And so when it gets serious, I don't think I would want to be talking about enjoying it. I think that maybe that was an unhelpful choice of words. But I do think that when it comes to things that don't devastate other people's lives, that don't devastate our lives, but where it's a chance for us to realize how much of a mess sometimes we are, actually those things, if we bring them to a God who loves us like this, and we acknowledge them and we receive his forgiveness, I think they can be a source of real, genuine joy. Because the more I realize how much of an idiot I am, and yet how much Jesus loves me, how much he's done for me, that actually, there's something beautiful and joyful about that that's much richer than just being like, yeah, I'm a pretty good person, and occasionally I slip up, and Jesus deals with that, and we carry on, but I'm basically an excellent guy. There's so much more joy in being like, I am a mess, and I don't have to pretend otherwise. But he is forgiving me and he is helping me.
Thank you. We've got a couple of questions that are quite practical as well. Okay. We'll probably make this one of the final ones. So do you have any advice for how to actually implement this in our lives? How can we let this have a bigger impact on things like in sports teams, academic school, that kind of thing?
Yeah. I think there's two parts of it. Recognizing the lies, the sort of the fictions, and digging into the truth. So on the one hand, I think it really helps, in something like sport, it really helps to think about those stories of people like Johnny Wilkinson, people who have got to the top of this ladder and then realize there's flipping nothing there. And there's something really liberating about realizing that and just be like, hey, I really want this, but actually, I'm going to enjoy this more if I realize that it's just really fun. It's a good gift that I get to play this sport. And it's not going to solve all of my problems if I get into the first team and if we win varsity. It's not. So that's liberating. And then the other thing I'd say is dig into the truth. Whether you are already a Christian or whether you're not, I'd encourage you to keep reading the original documents, to keep reading the New Testament and inviting God to speak to you through it and to show you the depth and the power and the beauty of his love and how much bigger that is than the other things that we worry about, and just trying to dig that into your heart every day. And I think that's a lifelong journey for us. I think it certainly is for me, but I just encourage you to keep going in it.
Thank you, Mike. I think we're going to have to end the Q&A there. Thank you very much. I'm very sorry if your questions were not answered. Thanks for asking all of them. It's been a pleasure to have Mike with us. It's been a pleasure to have you here. I've got a few things to say before we go, but I'm a failure and forgot some books. So give me 1 second. Let me just grab these. So I'm going to squeeze through here. Okay, this is worth it, don't worry. So we would love it if you guys kept thinking about all the things that we've been talking about today, all the things that we're going to keep talking about. And if anything has piqued your interest, then I have a couple of books to flag up that you can get from the back for free. The first of which is The Life of Jesus, a first-century biography. Mike mentioned the Gospel of Luke, or that's where he got the story from Jesus from. It's on page 57 of this book. You can go grab it. You can read it yourself, have a look at it, evaluate the evidence for yourself, take a look. That'd be a great thing to do. The second book is called Reality and Other Stories. Now, we found out there's only 2 English students in this room, and Mike is one of them. But if you also enjoy stories, and you're not an English student, then this would be a great book to pick up. We love the story of failure to success, or rags to riches, or tragedy. They're woven throughout our lives, and this would be a great way to investigate, where does that come from? Does Jesus have anything to do with that? Maybe. Look at that yourself. The other thing to say, today we have more events, tomorrow we've got more events. The first event coming up later this afternoon is iConnect Cafe. If you're an international student, if you're not an international student, more than welcome to come along. It's a great place to chat and chill, chat, connect. Thank you, Joel. Come along. It'll be great to see you there. The other event is this evening at 7 p.m. Not here. We're at Stag, St. Andrew the Great, which is literally just around the corner. You could stay here and then do a 5-minute walk if you want, although this might shut at some point. Worth pointing out, tonight we have Cecilia Brassett. Cecilia Brassett is coming along tonight and being interviewed. If you're a medic, you might know who that is. I'm not a medic, so I don't know who that is, but I'm excited to find out. And so you should come along and find out who that is. And if you were here last night, then you would have heard Matt talk, and he is also talking tonight on more things to do with being human. I believe, that's called Limits and Liberation tonight, which sounds quite cool. That's everything from us. Thank you so much for joining us. Please do hang around and chat, keep asking questions, and we'd love to see you back here again this week. Thank you.